Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Hall. I'm a 2012 initiate of our Iota Alpha chapter at Georgia College and State University, where I majored in political science. Today I have the opportunity to speak with you all about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's voting, specifically being an informed voter. Before I joined the Delta Sig headquarters staff, I worked for 2 years as a legislative aide for state senators in Georgia. First, let's talk a bit about the history of voting in this country. While there are still barriers to voting for many Americans today, the truth is we're much better positioned as a country to have a say in who represents us now more than ever before. Voting was initially a privilege reserved for affluent white property owners, but through the hard work and sacrifice of many over the centuries, laws and constitutional amendments have expanded access to the polls. It wasn't until the ratification of the 15th Amendment in 1870 that voting was opened up to people regardless of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. This was the last of what they called the three Reconstruction Amendments, which were passed after the conclusion of the Civil War. So less than a century ago, women weren't permitted to vote in every state until the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920. In 1964, the 24th Amendment made it unconstitutional to implement any type of poll tax, and with the ratification of the 26th Amendment in 1971, the eligible voting age was actually decreased from 21 to 18. This final amendment was championed by student activists who believed if they were old enough to be drafted to fight in Vietnam, they should have the right to vote for those authorizing the war. We've come a long way, but how have these efforts affected voter turnout? According to data from the U.S. Elections Project, eligible voter turnout in the last century hasn't surpassed 64% in a presidential election years, or 49% in midterm elections, which are the elections that take place the 2 years in the middle of a president's term. In the 2014 midterms, turnout was 36.7%, a 72-year low, and the 2016 presidential election only saw 60.1% turnout. For 18 to 29-year-olds, eligible voter turnout in the 2014 midterms and the 2016 presidential election was about 19.9% and 46.1% respectively. It can be quite the challenge navigating the nuances of laws in each state, especially for college students who are more than likely not going to school where they are registered to vote. If you're one of those collegiate brothers and you're looking for help navigating the process, I highly recommend you head on over to campusvoteproject.org and check out their state student guides. Ultimately, the lack of younger voters makes it harder for elected officials to represent the ideas that may be beneficial for our demographic. For instance, when over 50% of your constituents are asking you to focus on things like Medicare, it isn't really politically advantageous for you to spend your time on college affordability or the single-sex status of fraternities. That's why we must get out and vote. By becoming a larger percentile of the voters, younger individuals will expand their seat at the table of representation. Ultimately, being an informed voter is useless if you can't actually cast a ballot. When it comes down to it, you should always check out your state's Secretary of State website on elections for the most relevant information. Every state and municipality is a bit different, so it's important to pay close attention to things like voter registration deadlines, the different ways you can vote, and when and how you have to turn in your ballot. Unfortunately, the deadline to register to vote has passed in many states, but in 13 states you can register through Election Day, and in North Dakota, as long as you're a resident and have the appropriate documents, you're good to go. Outside of your Secretary of State's websites, vote.org is a fantastic resource to register to vote, check your voter registration status, and much more. Once you've confirmed you're registered, it's time to do a little research. While you've likely heard about the big-name candidates for office, there's likely much more on your ballot than people seeking federal office. Again, while you can likely find all the relevant information on your Secretary of State's website, it's often not organized super coherently. Ballotpedia.org has an awesome sample ballot tool. All you need is to provide your full address, and it can provide a pretty comprehensive breakdown of ballot initiatives and candidates, which you can then use to look up the specifics before actually voting. Speaking of voting, now that you're registered and you've researched what and who is on your ballot, it's time to make your voting plan. A lot of people like to vote on Election Day, but depending on what you have going on in your life, you may want to explore other options. In addition to voting in person, each state and municipality has different ways you can cast your vote, which can include absentee ballots, early voting, and in some states, mail-in ballots. Another resource I'd recommend for getting this information all in one place is usvotefoundation.org. Their voting methods and options page simplifies things by state, and their elections official directory is one of the easiest ways to find information about your local polling place. Whatever you decide to do, make sure you pay close attention to deadlines and any documentation you'll need to provide in order to vote. The last thing you want is to show up and be turned away on election day. Now that you're informed, there's no excuse. As Delta Sigs, we commit to being men of action. Regardless of your affiliation or ideals, many have come before you and made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure your right to vote. You owe it to your country, your community, and yourself to vote. Elections are much more than simply federal races. The local elections are far more likely to affect your day-to-day life. Don't forget to register, research, and vote. I want to say thank you to Kristen Fouts and everyone at Delta Sig for their hard work. I really appreciate this opportunity and the opportunities you are all creating for our members on a daily basis. We'll be sure to include all the links mentioned in the comments below. And finally, Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, so I hope to see you at the polls.